Good afternoon and welcome. This is Joe from Interact. We have a very special guest today with us, Barry Schwartz. Barry is the CEO of Rusky Brick, which is a New York web service firm specializing in online technology to help companies decrease costs and increase sales. But more importantly, for today's subject matter, Barry is also the founder of Search Engine Roundtable and the editor of Search Engine Land. And he's one of the most respected for his expertise in search marketing for about 20 years or so. Barry and I are both search engine gurus, if you will, algorithmic techies who are always interested in what's happening in the search landscape and as it relates to ranking websites. And Barry has written over 35,000 articles on the subject on his career and has had millions of people come to his website to read about the search industry and also to learn about different Google algorithm updates that have occurred over time. Well, this week we had what was one of the most outstanding stories in our industry for probably over a decade. And it relates to massive amounts of information being leaked either accidentally or intentionally anonymously on the internet. And Google has confirmed that this information was theirs and has been leaked, and it contains just thousands of variables and details about how variables are used in ranking websites on Google's primary search engine. So Barry's been blogging about it. Barry, welcome. I just wanted to thank you for taking the time today, for joining us. I think the last time we spoke was the middle of COVID outside for an interview with masks and being 10 feet apart. So good to see
Yeah.
you. Welcome.
Wild times. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's good to be here.
It's my pleasure. So, some people are calling this the biggest SEO news story of the decade, and I think there could be some truth to that. I think the next few weeks will start to unfold really what the impact of it is. But is this really a big deal in your mind? Because some of the things we've been reading about this were kind of assumed or understood by the SEO community, like the potential that they might be using Chrome data or click-through rates or things like that. So how big a deal is this in your opinion?
So yeah, the leak is a big deal. I mean, this is technically like Google's like secret sauce, like how search engines rank stuff. Although all the little details about how much each one is actually weighted, if it's used at all. I mean, these list everything across not just search, but Google Assistant, YouTube, and so forth. So it's hard to know exactly what each element is referring to, what every single element means, and how much each one is weighted. And if it was just used for testing purposes or not used now, was used in the past, maybe used in the future, we just don't know. So right now, it's a huge leak in that this is everything that Google's like has in its mind. It might be more stuff that we're missing also, but I think it is true that this is like the biggest story of the decade for Google.
And what do you think is the potential impact on agencies, businesses that utilize search engine optimization? What's the biggest impact that this leak could have in the next 5 or 6 years for companies that rely on search engine optimization?
So I don't think it's going to be like, I don't think it's going to impact like SEOs in terms of like, I need to do this to get top rankings. I don't think you're going to have a lot of people like being able to like manipulate Google because of this. I think there'll be a lot of people who try to. I think some will end up being able to find some gems in there and be able to manipulate them. But I don't think it's going to be massive amounts of spam like we saw like pre-Panda stuff. But I do think that there's a lot to learn in these things. I do think you'll have a lot of people making the wrong conclusions of this and then telling their clients, we need to do this because it's in this document. And just because it's in that document doesn't mean that it's actually being used by Google at all or much so, or maybe it'll be used in the future. Again, we don't know. So just because it's basically like some people are saying, it's like basically having, I don't know, you probably programmed stuff in your history and ended up deprecating it that you don't use that piece of anymore. So it's the same thing like that. Even though Google may have programmed it, maybe they programmed it to, see how certain signals might go ahead and affect a test data set of ranking. They may not have actually deployed that because it didn't work out well in the test. They may have used it for a while, decided to get rid of it. They may have used it and they said, because of legal reasons, we're going to stop using it. Or maybe they're using it in a line test that they're not using it. So it's hard to know.
Right.
But
Yeah, it's sort of like everybody has that favorite cake that like their grandma or their aunt used to make. And they said, I swear that I'm going to take the recipe to the grave, right? So, but then over time, they get the ingredient lists or they're there when they're making it. And even when you know all the ingredients, it's still not the recipe because it's how you utilize them and in what quantities and when you mix them in and how hot you cook it at. And if you got even a fraction of those wrong, you still don't have the full thing. So I think it is equated to that type of scenario. I would say that I remember, I can't tell you how many times I've referenced, just when describing our industry training employees speaking to clients, the patent submission of 2004, right when Google was going public and wanted to secure patents on their algorithm. Things like, oh, you have to keep the domain name registered longer than 1 year, and that's a variable, and anchor text in a link is a variable, and some of those things. And in a way, it was the great reveal of its time. And it became part of everybody's best practice list. But over time, the landscape kept shifting with how much those variables were actually put into weight and whether any of them are still used. But it did take SEO from sort of this black magic thing where you would hire some whiz kid and hand him a bag of money every month to actually like a scientific approach of, nope, there's variables and we know what some of them are and we know that we can work within that sandbox. So I do see this as like the next big opening of that Pandora's box, but it's still going to require testing and it's still changing. Like in the same week that this thing was discovered, Google rolled out Gemini at the top of search results and pushed everything down further. And we already know they're running a lot more advertising. So organic is a big part of the mix, but not as big as it was, right? So do you think that Google, as a result of this, now that they've admitted that there's some kind of leak here and they're assessing, right? Do you think they're going to make changes in the way that they aggregate and use personal data to assuage any public concerns? Because I do believe the concern here is more that they said that they weren't doing something and then they were actually doing it, right? And that's a trust issue, but it wasn't really misuse of personal data necessarily where people's information could be hacked. But what are your thoughts on Google privacy and consumer concerns about these things?
Yeah, again, so you're saying just because it's in the document means that they actually did use it. Google's argument is just because it's in the document doesn't mean we actually did it. So I think it was Nilay Patel who said on his last podcast in The Verge, it's like you creating an Excel spreadsheet of all your friends and then having a column for I don't know, their social security number or their credit card number, and saying then one of your friends finding it and it's empty, the field maybe, and saying, why do you have that column? What's in there? And you're like, well, nothing. We never used it. I'm like, so what's the point of having that column if we're never using it? So it's kind of like that, but at the same time, Google, they test everything from little
Right.
tiny pixels on their webpage to moving things around to algorithms. And I'm sure there's no doubt in my mind that they did test using certain types of Chrome data, privacy stuff over the years. But maybe they said, you know what? We tested it. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but it's not worth the liability to actually use it. I mean, any smart company would do that, I think, meaning test it to see what the kind of types of results would reveal in terms of quality of the search results. But did they go ahead and actually use it?
Right.
I don't know. I mean, maybe they did this back in
And it
like
could
when
be
Chrome.
someone asked, are you using this data? And they said, no, we're not. And then behind the scenes, they're like, well, good idea. Maybe we could look at that. Right. And so, like, because they're constantly trying to make it the best, I do believe still at heart that Google's intent is to produce results that serve the uh, audience, the consumer, the individual. And from the beginning, most of their decision making around how they utilize this data is to produce the highest quality results and really to be the best search engine. And so I do think that, yes, what we have here is maybe a list of everything they've thought about and maybe begun to test, but not that weight, not that recipe, right? And so that's what we just want to eliminate confusion about that. But I can tell you, we've put 7 or 8 hours extra at the end of the workday with the team into this, and we've found things like nav boost and some of these other components of it that are definitely looking like we didn't have the full picture. And I think that that's true algorithmically. It's true in some reports I've seen with what percentage of long tail traffic is going to big brands versus small sites. I think it's true that smaller sites are in jeopardy of not getting the attention they once did, even if they're meeting algorithmically sound practices. But that could just be the nature of the world, right? The rest of the world operates with 80-20 and 90-10 rules. The internet, we saw it as the great equalizer, where some, blogger out of Muncie could become the industry leading search guy, right? And I'm thinking that even when we're looking at different industries that we service, we're seeing the impact of the algorithm changes over time being more favorable to larger sites. And I think that's normal. They'll naturally get more links. They'll naturally get more attention, and especially with advertising taking up more of the top. But listen, this is a company. They're a public company. They're here to make money. They can add advertising as a monetization mechanism. Companies like DuckDuck can come in and say, we're never going to use any of your data, and they're still third or fourth in market share. And I don't know that we're at that crux point where I think the general public is going to feel that Google did anything wrong. I think SEOs are going to be suspect, but not necessarily general consumer privacy. So I tend to agree. So let's talk about what's happening now. Like, search results are changing again. I know you've written some articles on it. Gemini is here. In many ways, I think they're behind GPT in terms of the capabilities of the chat engine and what it can do. But having used it more this month, I'm also seeing that there's some intelligence built in there that's not in GPT. And I think a lot of it has to do with the nodes and the warehousing and how Gemini can access Google's data warehouses. So for example, I can say, go to this URL, or using only information from this list of URLs, come back and give me an answer about this. And I think GPT still can't do that, but Gemini seems to be able to do it. Or I referenced the other day, show me case law from this particular thing, and it was able to pull out New York case law and put stuff in front of me that Gemini could do and GPT couldn't. So now it's at the top of the Google search page in like 10 or 15% of the searches we do. The AI buys right at the top. So what do you see in terms of them launching this, into the search results? And do you see prominent changes in the algorithm continue to rely more on AI and less on traditional search results?
So I can't answer the algorithm itself. Yeah, I mean, Google has said historically they don't want to have AI run the whole entire algorithm. They need to be able to piecemeal it. So the different elements in the Google search algorithm rely a lot on AI. And if one of the elements go bad, then they could say, all right, let's isolate that one element. Let's say feature snippets or whatever it might be. So it's hard to say. Yeah, of course, AI is the future. So I do suspect more and more AI will go into the algorithm. And you can see by their leadership changes over the years that that's the direction they're going with the leadership they're hiring and putting into place. That being said, it is different than like GPT, because although the T in GPT is founded and created by Google, but it is different than GPT because even Google says this. Even if you look at Gemini now, if you do a command in Gemini, there's this little Google icon button at the bottom. And you click that, it would actually say, we're going to validate what our Gemini answer is based on what we have in our search index. So it's actually validating and saying, is this stuff hallucinating or is it not? Based on what we know about across the open web. And that's what, I don't know if you saw the blog post from Liz Reed, the head of Google Search, last night, when she responded to all the criticism about Google's AI answers. It got a lot of funny responses. And I just noticed a couple minutes ago when I was looking it over, that the first link in that blog post links to a 2019 blog post where I kind of made fun of Google's feature snippets, where it talked about horses having too many legs and snakes and so forth. So they actually linked to that, showing that, yeah, we have these issues even with feature snippets. In any event, it talks about that. It basically says that, sorry, 1 second. Sorry, cough there. That their AI overviews work differently than chatbots and other LLM products that people may have tried out. And she goes on to say, they're simply They're not simply generating an output based on training data, which is what other tools do, like ChatGPT.
Right.
And while the AI overviews are powered by customized language models, the models is integrated into our core web ranking systems and designed to carry out traditional web search with using a highly relevant and identify relevant information and so forth. She goes on to say this means that AI overviews generally don't hallucinate or make things up in the way that other LLMs products do. So it's just different because it's
Yeah,
Google's
no, I'm being
validating those AI
experienced that
answers.
GPT, where when it doesn't know, it doesn't say, I'm not capable of doing that because I don't have enough data. It just makes stuff up, right?
Right.
We had a
And
client and we were like, oh, we want to be sure to include reference cases. So sometimes it makes stuff up and sometimes it actually has stuff. But what I found with Gemini is that conversationally, I just felt like it was more intelligent and it could do more of the things that I was asking it to do, especially when limiting or referencing the data set to specific websites, specific trusted sites, those types of things. And then incredibly good with granular stuff like for legal thing, like in the state of New York with this specific legal issue, I was just really impressed by its ability to do that, and then be fact checked 100% for accuracy, at least so far in my experience. So tell me this, I know one of the things that we rely on, and it's always, we're so busy serving clients that sometimes we're not looking at algorithmic changes or volatility. We happen to see sometimes swings across the entire client base and investigate. But one of the top ways that we look at search volatility and potential algorithm releases is your newsletter, right? It comes into the inbox and we go, oh, Barry's team is seeing some stuff or he's reporting on some stuff in industry. And then we go and look. And you've had 4 such articles since this thing was discovered and removed on May 7th. Have you done enough analysis into what's happening in those algorithm updates to determine whether it was a reaction or response to this leak?
so it's definitely not a response to the leak. The algorithm updates happened prior to the leak was made public. And so nothing to do with the leak at all. Those algorithm updates may have to do with Google tweaking the last core update, but I'm not sure. I did ask Google that. I'm going to be interviewing Google at XMX, Elizabeth Tucker, who announced the core update, and I'll be asking that question about what's going on. You finished the core update, and then we're seeing after the core update 4 or 5 significant, massive changes in the Google search rankings or on an aggregate level. What's going on? I hope she gives us a good answer on that because it does seem like that, but it was definitely not a reaction to any leaked documents.
That the document itself was dated about late August or early September. It didn't leak on, I think it was GitHub was where it was first seen until March 29th of this year. It was discovered and pulled down May 7th. And then it didn't really hit big news until like 4 days ago or so. Right. So anything that would have happened between March 29th and May 7th, they probably weren't aware that it was there. But after May 7th is what I was talking about. If they were
no, they were not aware after May 7th. They just became public.
After May 7th is when I started seeing Gemini just appear in 20% of the searches we were doing. And it made me think like, oh, are they taking some reaction to the fact that this was out there? But could just be completely unrelated at this point. And I don't want to be speculative on the call.
No, Google didn't know
what she has
Google,
to say when he asked.
Google didn't know that it was leaked until like May 27th.
Got it.
It was an accident. I assume it was an accident. Google didn't say otherwise. They're not going after, but I don't know if it was like intentionally leaked by somebody at Google or what. But Google had no idea until like May 27th.
Have you secured a copy yourself of the document?
Yeah, who hasn't? Yeah.
just wanted to check.
Of course, yeah. There's a lot of good websites. I think a bunch of SEOs have made other copies of it as well, and it's on this hex.com website as well, which is basically like a wayback machine for like GitHub. So it's available once it's out of the web. It's gone. It's out of the web.
A significant topic of conversation for many months to come. Is there anything else you want to add, just as insights to this leak, Barry, or just globally, like what's happening with search optimization? I know that when you interviewed me, you asked my opinion on that 5 years ago. I don't know that much has changed about my opinion of it. I still think that, it's search is unique in it's a way to, for people to find more about what they're looking for, not just academically, but when it comes to the commercial aspect, which is mostly where I work with, companies trying to sell products and services and have more visibility. It's when you can put your product or service in front of someone at the very moment that they're looking for it with such specificity and intent on their part. There's no other form of marketing like it in the world. And whether they're doing that on Google or in Amazon or YouTube search, or whether they're talking it into their phone to find a good Thai restaurant in the city that night that they're visiting, I think it's always going to be an integral part that's initiated by the consumer about the intent of the specific buying action. And that's why I think search is still responsible for 80% or more of sales that occur or initiate online. And people that if you're doing campaigning with just pure social media and not measuring intent, that you're not going to get as good an ROI or conversion rate. So I think it's here to stay, but I have some specific thoughts on how it might shift over time. What do you think that like consumer experience specifically is going to look like on search as we move forward? Like what might change?
I mean, the AI overviews are the big thing. Google is going to be, you're going to see it more and more as Google becomes more confident in the results. Google pulled it back a little bit over the past couple of days around health and other queries, but you'll definitely see it continue to expand to more. And the question is, how will SEOs adapt, and how will those AI overviews adapt and change in order to get traffic to those publishers who are creating that content that Google's using for those AI overviews? Now, Google's said they're committed to it. They're going to make sure it drives traffic to publishers. But ultimately, you want to make sure that you have that conversion. It might be a brand conversion. It might be somebody clicking over to your website conversion. But it's funny, like when featured snippets first launched, every SEO is like, I don't want to be there. It's Google stealing my content. I don't want to be there. Now, if anybody has a feature snippet and drops, and that feature snippet is removed, the SEO is upset and they want to go ahead and get back that feature snippet. So I think the same thing will happen with these AI overviews. And I think a lot of the optimizations will be like, how do I get into these AI overviews? And that's going to be the future.
Right.
And writing content that the AI overviews want to cite is going to be a very big part of the future of Google search, I think.
I agree. And I think voice search is growing slowly, but becoming more and more critical as well. I remember some industries that are up over 15, 20% of all inbound searches are coming through a voice type search.
Right. But by voice search, it's more going to be like conversational now. I'm going to the movies. What type of movie do you like? Oh, I like fiction. Okay, fiction. What time approximately do you like to watch the movies? When do you want to be home? It's going to be like
Right.
that.
Yeah, we used to do it where it was just like, oh, Thai food near me. And I'm stuck on the Thai because I haven't had it in a while. So it's Friday night, might begin. So, but it was just all about, you know, show me this thing near me. But now it can be more conversational. Now the bot might work more with you like a real concierge to find something perfect for you, right? Um, and that's an interesting aspect of it. It's conversational. It's not just search and you will find. It's search and be more specific. Tell me what you like. What are you going to do, right? And do you think that would be the case for just the primary search results as well? Like where it's
Right.
going to start asking more right in there. What do you mean by personal injury lawyer or like stuff like that?
Right. So part of Google's announcement around AI overviews at Google I/O was let Google do the Googling for you. So you search for something, then it's going to like prompt you to ask more questions and to go deeper. So the AI overviews do let you expand and let you like create more follow-up questions to it. So you have a conversation with it. Now everybody's gonna be talking to robots all day long and not know how to talk to humans. So that's another issue. That's for another podcast, I assume. So
I think we're already halfway there.
yeah,
So, hey, listen, I know we're at the end of our time here soon, but again, I wanted to thank you for joining. I know it's a busy week when you got lots of interviews, and I'm humbled to know that you would take it from a fellow Rocklander and local guy here. So, thanks, Barry, for everything that you bring to our industry and for taking some time to answer these questions today. And we'll see each other again in the future, I'm sure.
for sure. Thanks so much for having me.
You got it. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.